Mayor Thompson and members of the City Council recently voted to move forward with the implementation of a plan to renovate Hunter Park, which is the city's largest park. Hi, I'm Bill Osmond, City Manager, and today I'll be giving you a little background on projects in our Parks and Recreation Department, and I'll be talking with our Director of the Parks and Recreation Department, Tracy Ivey. I hope you will join me for this edition of On the Agenda.
Hello, I'm Mayor Thompson, and my city TV is legislative.
Detailed plans for the total renovation of Hunter Park are now being prepared, and we expect the start of construction to begin following the end of our summer season. Now, when completed, this plan will provide new park facilities for our citizens, the renovation of some of our current facilities, and a lot more parking for everybody who goes to Hunter Park. Now, the Hunter Park renovation plan will be the final of the three major projects to be financed through the City of Douglasville 2002 SPLOSH program, the Parks and Recreation component of that part of the SPLOSH program. We have done a reconstruction of Davis Park. We've purchased the land for the West Pines Golf Course, and the third major project is the renovation of Hunter Park. Now, I'll be talking today with our Parks and Recreation Director, Tracy Ivey. But before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of background on things with our 2002 SPLOSH program for Parks and Recreation and where we are at this time. Now, Georgia law provides that a referendum in which voters decide whether or not there will be a 1 cent special option sales tax called a SPLOSH, that only can be called by the County Board of Commissioners. And back in 2002, the Douglas County Board of Commissioners decided to call for a SPLOSH vote on several different kinds of projects, including projects for parks and recreation. And 3 of those projects were identified to be City of Douglasville projects. They're the ones I mentioned a minute ago: the reconstruction of Davis Park, purchase of land for the West Pines Golf Course, and the Hunter Park renovation. Now, we were certainly pleased, as was the county government, when the voters back in 2002 voted for the levying of that 1 cent special purpose local option sales tax to fund these projects. And the two governments cooperated on certain aspects of implementing the Parks and Recreation projects. The city worked with the county, and subsequently the Board of Commissioners selected a consultant that was involved in helping both governments come up with the prioritization of their projects, on looking at prototypes for buildings that would be in the park, such as restrooms, concession stands, and scores of facilities. Now, one project that we had was the reconstruction of Davis Park. This project, of course, has been completed, and we expended almost $2 million for the work in Davis Park. And this was in addition to a major project we had done in Davis Park that was completed a short time before the SPLOSH vote back in 2002. That being the construction of a large community center, multi-purpose center that was funded jointly by the City of Douglasville from its general fund and through a community development block grant from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. And of course, this is what we now know as the Alice Minor Hawthorne Community Center. That includes a gymnasium as well as multi-purpose rooms. Now, using some other SPLOSH funds, the city bought the land for the West Pines Golf Course. Also, we used that money to pay for a new entry road to the golf course off of Rose Avenue, and for some minor part of the construction, the reconstruction, as it were, of the golf course. We had a total of $6.3 million to spend on West Pines. We have spent all of that money except a little over $262,000, and I expect this balance we will transfer to be a part of our Hunter Park project. Let me remind you that the major source of the renovation cost for the West Pines Golf Course came through the issuance of bonds, and we're paying off those bonds on an annual basis using revenues that we're receiving from the firm that was selected to do the renovation work and that to operate the West Pines Golf Course. Now, at the same time that we did this work on Davis Park and bought West Pines, we were making some limited improvements in Hunter Park that using funds from the 2002 SPLOST program. We made repair work and did some needed upgrades on the swimming pool. We made some improvements to the ball fields and to some other parts of the park. In total, we spent a little over $626,000 for these improvements, as well as for the development of plans for the total redevelopment of Hunter Park, and that included a community center. Now, we had hired the firm of Lyman Davis and Dooley to prepare these plans, and they did so, and we put that out for bid. But the City Council in July of 2004 rejected all of the bids because they were $1.4 million above what our budget was for this project. And the major reason for that is, or the major reasons for that is that there was a lot of site preparation work that would be required, a lot of storm drainage issues to deal with, and we were relocating the entry road off of Gurley Road. Now, what we did then was to continue to work with Lyman Davis and Dooley on some alternate plans, and a major part of that was moving the community center, the multipurpose building, from being somewhat near the current Ike Owens building, and we looked at putting it on that land between Gurley Road and the lake. But we had a problem with being able to do that because that part of Hunter Park, some 30 years earlier, had been purchased using, in part, money from a land and water conservation grant that we received. And so in order for there to be any permanent structure built on that particular part of the property, we had to go back to the state of Georgia and to the federal government and get them to agree to let us put the building on this part of our park. And they did agree that we could take 2 acres of that tract and use it, we could disturb that land. In other words, we didn't have to leave it undisturbed. We could actually have that as a building site and a parking area. And so we were at the point where we could have started work, but we felt like that there was a way to look at an even bigger and better community center. Douglas County had announced plans in 2007 for another SPLOST, and the two governments felt like that a good project might be a larger, more comprehensive community center, and the operation of that would be in a contractual arrangement with the YMCA over a period of a number of years. Well, that project, and of course every other project proposed for the 2007 SPLOST, never was able to move forward because the voters rejected that SPLOST referendum back in 2007. Now, a few weeks after that September 2007 referendum failed, the city began to take a fresh look at what we might do on development of Hunter Park. And we looked at the options that we had for what we might do in Hunter Park. We looked at the possibilities that we had on land that the city had purchased off of Bright Star Road. And so what we did is that we worked on that. And when I come back after a break, I'll have with me City Parks and Recreation Director Tracy Ivey, and we'll be talking about where we are at this time in Hunter Park and where we plan to go. So I hope you'll stay tuned.
Hi, I'm James Gribble, and My City TV is streaming 24/7.
Inactive activities on a glorious day. Huh? Let's get out there and play!
Sweet.
PLA! There are lots of great play ideas online.
Well, I'm pleased to welcome to this edition of On the Agenda Tracy Ivey, who is the longtime director of the city's Parks and Recreation Department. Tracy, welcome to On the Agenda.
Thank you, Bill. I'm excited about being here today.
Well, it's great to have you. And I was looking back on my records and saw that this was your second time that you would be on the agenda. The first time was about 9 months ago when we had you on the agenda to talk about July 4th activities in Hunter Park. And today we're not just talking about one event in Hunter Park. We're going to talk about all of Hunter Park and the total renovation of Hunter Park. We might even call it the total reconstruction of Hunter Park. Give us a brief rundown of what lies ahead for Hunter Park.
I'll be happy to, and it's hard for me to believe that it was more than 9 months ago that we were doing this. Time has certainly flown, but I'm glad that we're where we are today. Bill, basically we're talking about a large scope project that includes the renovation of existing facilities, the new construction of certain facilities, and the reorientation of certain facilities to make our user groups have an easier time to use the facility, to allow our Parks and Recreation Department maintenance staff to have an easier time maintaining our facility. And we believe that in the end we'll have a very fine park for our community and other users as well to use, to take advantage of. Well,
that's great. I appreciate that overview. You know, I know that a key part of the discussion that you and I had had with the mayor and the city council when we were going through this process is that how we could locate the facilities in the park with two things in mind. And as you mentioned, we wanted those facilities to be situated so that we would have the most efficient and the easiest use of those. And we wanted to place these facilities where we wouldn't run into the problems we had run into back in 2004 of having such a major expense for site preparation, especially because of the drainage situation we have in Hunter Park. And for people who don't know, that hillside you see in Hunter Park, there's a lot of springs in that, and as a result, then as you come down through Hunter Park, you've got a lot of water issues that you have to deal with. And of course, that was a major reason that the bids were rejected back in July 2004 because the price tag was so steep for the drainage and site preparation. Now, last summer, late last summer, we presented a specific proposal to the mayor and to the full city council. We already had been working on that with Mayor Thompson and with the Mayor Pro Tem Roy Mims, who's chairman of our Parks and Recreation Committee. City Council discussed this and looked at it for about 6 weeks, and then back on October the 6th, they approved the concept that had been prepared by Breedlove Land Planning. And of course that concept, one of the things that I liked when I saw it, had more than 900 parking spaces, which I think will be a great improvement when we have the major events. But tell us, if you would, if you look at what the concept was that was approved by the mayor and council last fall and the one that we had originally back in 2004, what are some of the major differences there?
Bill, some of the major differences and the most visible are obviously, you just mentioned the parking. Our parking situation has always been somewhat of a disaster in Hunter Park, and we have finally have developed a layout that I believe will address those parking issues, not just for the capacity of parking, but also for the layout and circulation within the park. That's been a very key issue for us to overcome over the years, and this will address that. The other key issues or differences, I believe, in looking at our athletic components, we have added a special needs field, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. And also just a general layout is a better layout. It uses the entire park better, the acreage that we have available, it uses it a lot better. And with the relocation of the building from the entry road to between Gurley Road and the lake, we're able to tie those passive recreation components in together. And that's what the state and federal government were looking at when we requested to use that facility or that area of the park for the community center. So those, I think, are the key components that will be the main differences that we look at. Okay, appreciate that explanation. You know, back in October of last year, they did approve the concept plan, and then almost 6 weeks after that, namely on November 17th, they authorized the mayor to sign an agreement with Breedlove Land Planning
for Breedlove to prepare the detailed plans for this renovation project. And of course the mayor signed that, and Breedlove is at work at this time and preparing detailed construction plans. Now, that doesn't include the actual community center building that we'll touch on later, though it does include the site prep for that building. But I'm excited to see this project happening, probably not quite as much as you who live it day by day, but I think it's going to be very good. But I know that you have to be excited about this.
I'm tremendously excited. I think I've been probably one of the most patient individuals that you may have met in a while. I've been with the city for 19 years, and this has always been a goal of mine to see these types of renovations and improvements done in our park system. And with the completion of West Pines and the renovation of Jesse Davis Park, this will kind of wrap up the final phase of what some of my goals have been, and I'm very excited that I'm able to talk about it today.
Right. Well, before we look at some of the details of the new plan, I want to make just a brief financial report concerning this, and you'll be able to see this on the screen also. But when we started with the 2002 SPLOST allocation for the renovation of Hunter Park, we had $5,457,000 allocated. Now, if you subtract that $626,000 that I mentioned earlier that we have already spent, that leaves you just a little bit above $4.8 million. And then if you add to that about $262,000 that we can transfer over from West Pines, about $11,000 that we had left in the Davis Park budget that we can transfer. But the big thing is that because of all the interest income that we have received and then the additional SPLOST revenues from the 1 cent SPLOST tax that we imposed, we have now $7,142,000 that we can look at on this project. And so that will enable us really to look at far more in terms of dollar amount. Now, I don't know with the way the economy is that in terms of the value of the dollar, but the bottom line is that we've got $7.1 million. Won't have any more than that to spend on whatever we do, but that's what we're looking at. But now let's talk about some specifics of what's in the concept plan that was approved by the council back in October. And as we look at these today, Tracy, the fact that we take up something first and something fourth, that doesn't have anything to do with the priorities. We're just taking up different parts of this. But I do want to start with parking because, as you mentioned, that's been a major problem down through the years. We've not had enough parking, so tell us what we're looking at on parking.
Well, we're looking at the end of the project, approximately 900 spaces. Those will be in and amongst the different components that we have in the park. For example, we'll have parking dedicated for the tennis court area. Mm-hmm. We'll have parking dedicated for the community center and for future expansion. Right. We'll have dedicated parking in our 7-cluster baseball field area. So we have dedicated parking areas, and then we have just some miscellaneous parking throughout the rest of the park that will also help us when we have large events like Labor Day and July 4th and any other major events that may begin to come into the park, because we will have a first-class park, and I believe we're going to see some more additional special events in our facility once we're complete. Right, right.
Now, and of course, part of that parking will be in the area that's now the football field and what used to be the practice field. But of course, you've shifted football over to Davis Park, so that let us be able to use that. But that sounds great. Now let's talk about ball fields, and let's start with the new fields. So tell us about that.
Well, we have a combination of projects. We will be reorienting some fields. We'll be deleting fields by their location today and relocating those as new construction in another area of the park. At the end of the day, when the project's complete, we will have netted 2 fields, and we have always had a large contingency of young sports enthusiasts and adults as well, so we'll have a combination of adult program facilities and youth program facilities, and we're very excited that we're actually able to grow those, hopefully grow those numbers. So I think the biggest asset in our cluster of the baseball fields, however, or our 7-field cluster, is the addition of that special needs field, and that's something, again, we'll talk about later.
Well, let's just talk about it right now.
All right, well, we can do that. I think the most exciting part for me in that is that there are very few of these fields in the Atlanta metropolitan area. It is growing in popularity, but there's still very few compared to able-bodied fields in any city or county Parks and Recreation Department. And it will have 0 barriers. It will be designed specifically for the child with special needs, whether it be visual or physical. And what we've done, I think, most importantly, is we have integrated that in with the rest of the athletic component so that we haven't separated those kids to make those individuals or their families feel like they're different. You know, we're trying to integrate them into our regular programming. I think that's going to be another emphasis that we'll need to take a look at will be therapeutic recreation, and that's something that very near and dear to me. That's actually my background, so I'm looking forward to trying to expand our programmatic component just a little bit with the addition of this field. So
very good. And as you've been talking, we did show for just a few moments the actual plan of that cluster of fields, and if somebody's looking at that and they're looking at where they are in the park, they're probably saying, well, what happened to the Ike Owens building? What happened to the parking between Ike Owens and Candler and Webb Field? What happened to those old abandoned tennis courts? The answer is they're gone.
They're gone.
Because we are using that space to be part of this the complex that you've just described. Right. But now, we got some fields that we're retaining, the lower fields. Tell us about the lower fields.
The lower fields, our current configuration is we've got 3 ball fields down on the lower end of the park, which is the most eastern corner of the park. And we're going to be eliminating one of those fields due to some drainage issues. We're going to create a retention pond area down there, retention area. And the other 2 fields we will continue to use throughout this process, throughout the construction process. We want to keep our programs going as best we can. There will be some improvements to those facilities. We'll add batting cages in the area. We'll upgrade the general area with walking access back to the parking lots. Right. And we'll also add a restroom facility down there. So that's always been one of the most needed things in that area was the upgrade of a restroom facility. So we're going to really take a strong look at upgrading our restroom facilities within the park. Okay.
Now tell me about Webb Field and Chandler Field.
Well, the familiar Webb Field and Chandler Field, which are adjacent to each other, will remain as they are as far as their location and proximity to each other. And then west of those 2 fields will be the addition of 5 brand new fields. Right. And 3 of those will be T-ball size fields. 1 would be an additional girls softball field. And then the field that we removed from the lower end of the park will be replaced back in that area. So that's where we'll pick that field back up.
And that's where we get the 7-field cluster that you were talking about.
That's where we get the 7-field cluster. And we're also adding batting cages in that area as well as a new concession and press box area.
Right. And I know one thing that we'll be working on as we go through this is to install some new seating in Webb Field, and that so we'll even with our existing fields, we're looking at some improvements being made.
Absolutely.
Well, now, how about just giving a recap for me on if you look at the different age groups and where they will be playing, and including in that what we'll be looking at on adult softball.
Okay, our age groups will range from 4 years old, the pre-T-ball player, all the way through adults. Right. And the special needs, of course, will be utilized by kids of various ages. It's kind of hard to put those kids in age groups specific. They sometimes, it's based on their abilities. And so that will be used by a wide range of ages. Our adult softball fields, we currently only have 1 adult softball field in Hunter Park. We will take the existing field due east of Field 2, which is the plane right next to the Airplane Memorial when you come in, and we will reorient that field, and that's where we get that second adult field. Okay. So that will help us grow our adult softball program, which is a very good and thriving program for us, and we're looking forward to being able to grow those numbers as well. Okay.
Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago that Ike Owens will that building will have to be demolished. Of course, to be replaced by the new community center that you had mentioned. That parking, the limited parking we now have adjacent to Webb and Chandler going toward the Ike Owens building will more than be replaced by the new parking. And of course the old tennis court area, I think you got a couple of batting cages in there now, that will be gone. But we also, several years ago, built some tennis courts up on the hillside. And I know that there are plans involving that area up on the hillside for tennis. Tell us about that.
Yes, sir. We do plan on expanding our tennis area in Hunter Park, not necessarily with the addition of more courts, but we're just going to be improving that general area. We'll have better access to that area into the main body of the park. We're going to try to bring those, we'll build 4 new tennis courts, and we'll bring those farther from the Boys and Girls Club down into closer to the rest of the facilities in Hunter Park, so we can pull all those in together and see an area between the Boys and Girls Club so they can be autonomous and so can we. So we're 2 different operations. And we also will be adding some parking, a restroom facility, and in that area north of the adult softball fields, we'll be adding some additional parking. So all that will be a little tighter and a little easier to maintain, and that's really an eyesore up in that area. We'll be addressing that from an aesthetic standpoint. So it just looks now like a part of the park. So we're excited about being able to do that also.
And you know, probably a lot of our viewers may have thought those tennis courts that we have now are actually part of the Girls and Boys Club complex. And indeed, that is city property. It's part of Hunter Park, but a number of years ago, the city and the Girls and the Boys Clubs signed an agreement so that we gave them a land lease, and I think that's worked well down through the years with them being located there in Hunter Park. But we wanted to be sure that it was clearly identified that these were tennis courts that were part of our Parks and Recreation Department, and with the improvements that you're talking about, I think that will more clearly delineate all of this. So all of those are things that we have Breedlove Land Planning working on at this time. And when we do our second on the agenda, which will be aired in the next couple of weeks, that we'll be talking in detail about not only the timeline for the implementation of all of this, but what will we be doing during the time that all the work is underway at Hunter Park. But Breedlove will do the as we mentioned earlier, the site, the drawings, the plans, engineering plans for the community center. But the community center will be handled separately, and as I mentioned earlier in our program, Lyman Davis and Dooley, of course, had drawn those plans. We've had them to do some revisions, and we're asking right now to look at some things that you and I have been working with them on. But I want to just let people know that we're going to talk in detail about the community center, the multipurpose center, on our next program. And I say that, Nick, can you join me for the next time on the agenda?
I would certainly be happy to.
All right, well, we'll do that. And now, always, Tracy, I give my guests the opportunity to have a last word. So I'll give you the opportunity to have your last word today.
Well, I hope these aren't my last words, but certainly for today, I'll take advantage of that. And I'd just like to say that I'm very, very excited about this opportunity that we have as a Parks and Recreation Department employee, leader, and as part of the City of Douglasville, I think we're all excited about this. And we've worked very closely in the last few months, and we'll continue to work very closely on the tight development of this park and the final wrap-up of our SPLOST program. So I look forward to the next show. We'll have a lot more details, and I think everyone will be happy. Just be patient with us, and we'll make it to the end.
Right, and I appreciate you being here today. And just a final word to our viewers, especially all of those who come to the park on July the 4th and on Independence Day. Hey, those events will still be in Hunter Park like we have in the past. And then we'll be really starting to move dirt right after Labor Day is our plan. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you next time on the agenda.